The Germans hated it to the core. They could recognize that sound instantly, even through the thunder of tanks and the scream of shells. It meant only one thing: their armor would not save them this time. The DShK, a Soviet heavy machine gun whose sound could stop hearts on the battlefield. It wasn't the most accurate, nor the most modern, yet it was feared more than artillery itself. Why? Because the DShK didn't just fire, it tore confidence out of the enemy. It turned attackers into targets, tanks into heaps of metal, and planes into falling sparks. The more they tried to destroy it, the more often they found it again, mounted on tank turrets, truck beds, hilltops, and even in the air. This weapon lived a long life, almost 8 decades. It outlasted eras, wars, and armies, yet remained a symbol of strength, simplicity, and reliability. To understand why German troops feared this heavy barrel so deeply and why it's still used across the world, we must return to where it all began. In the late 1920s, the Red Army faced a challenge. After the revolution, the country was rebuilding, but the world was rearming fast. The main machine gun of the time, the old Maxim, was reliable but already outdated. It couldn't handle the new threats. Tanks grew tougher, aircraft faster, and the army needed a weapon that could pierce armor and reach the sky. Soviet engineers were given a task: to create a universal heavy machine gun, one that could protect infantry and bring down planes. The answer came from Vasily Degtyaryov, a designer already famous for his light machine guns. He knew that simply increasing caliber wasn't enough. The weapon had to be something a soldier could rely on in mud, dust, frost, or rain. Starting his work in the late 1920s, Degtyaryov, together with engineer Shpagin, spent nearly a decade pursuing perfection. The first version appeared in 1938, and with it, a legend was born. DShK, Degtyaryov Shpagin Krupna Kalibnu, large caliber. During testing, the weapon impressed everyone with its power. A 12.7mm caliber, enough to punch through armor plates or down light aircraft. But its real strength wasn't in numbers, it was in simplicity. The mechanism used gas operation. Part of the shot's energy reloaded the weapon automatically. While one bullet hit the target, the next was already waiting. It fired nearly 550 rounds per minute, a continuous stream of steel until the belt ran dry. One of its greatest innovations was the quick-change barrel. In intense combat, the metal could glow red hot. Without replacement, the gun would fail. But the DShK allowed barrel swaps in seconds, saving crews when battles dragged on too long for the living. That feature made the gun nearly immortal. It could fire for hours, as long as the ammo lasted. Soviet engineers also designed it for easy maintenance. Even an inexperienced soldier could disassemble and reassemble it in the field without tools. Few moving parts, maximum reliability. It was the perfect balance between power and practicality, between engineering precision and the brutal reality of war. But firepower isn't only about mechanics. It's also about ammunition. The DShK used several types of rounds, each with its own purpose. The B-32, armor-piercing, capable of punching through 20 millimeters of steel from 100 meters. The BZT, armor-piercing incendiary tracer, allowing aimed fire even at night. And the MDZ, instant action incendiary, igniting upon the slightest touch of armor. It wasn't just destructive, it was psychological. Once these rounds began to strike, the enemy understood. There was no cover left. The DShK's first real trials didn't happen on training grounds, but in combat. In 1939, at the Khalkhin-Gol River, Soviet forces clashed with the Japanese army. There, in the Mongolian sands, the DShK spoke for the first time. It was mounted on trucks, dug into trenches, placed on improvised turrets. Japanese infantry used to light weapons felt for the first time what it meant to face a wall of heavy caliber fire. Even light tanks, thought to be invulnerable to rifles, burst into flames after a few hits. Command quickly realized the army now had a weapon that changed the rules of war. So when the Great Patriotic War began, the DShK was already in service. That's when it truly became legendary. It was mounted on armored vehicles, on IL-2 attack planes, on rail platforms, and on anti-aircraft positions. Whatever the role, it performed flawlessly. By 1941, when the German invasion began, the DShK was already proving its worth. It wasn't just a machine gun anymore. It was a shield, a deterrent, and for many, a symbol of survival. Soviet troops used it everywhere. Mounted on tanks like the T-34 and KV, it protected advancing formations from enemy aircraft. Placed on rooftops, on hilltops, on improvised tripods, it could tear through infantry lines and even pierce the side of a half-track. Its range, up to 1.5 kilometers, allowed it to reach targets thought untouchable. For German pilots, diving low to strafe Soviet columns suddenly became a deadly mistake. Even armored fighters could be ripped apart by a few well-aimed bursts. Frontline soldiers said you could hear it before you saw it. A low, rhythmic thunder that meant the enemy's air raid might never return home. In their diaries, some German pilots called it the Russian curse.
But behind the power was something even more remarkable: durability. The DShK worked in any climate, through mud, snow, and desert storms. It didn't jam easily, didn't rust, and didn't need special treatment. For soldiers on the Eastern Front, where every day meant chaos and shortage, that was priceless. In the field, if something broke, they fixed it with a hammer, a wrench, or even a boot heel. It kept shooting. Always. That's why, among the troops, a saying appeared: where the DShK starts speaking, silence follows. And yet, this weapon wasn't standing still. Engineers continued improving it, fine-tuning the recoil system, adjusting sights, reducing weight. In 1946, a new version appeared, the DShKM, modernized. The upgrade looked minor, but its effect was massive. It became easier to carry, more stable, and even more reliable. The feed mechanism was improved, allowing continuous belts without frequent reloading. It became a soldier's dream: unstoppable, simple, and devastating. Then came the Cold War, and with it, new wars. The DShK didn't retire. It fought again, this time in Korea. Used by both North Koreans and Chinese troops, it rained fire on American aircraft and convoys. Even heavily armored vehicles had to respect its range and impact. In the Middle East, it appeared in the hands of Egyptian and Syrian forces during the Arab-Israeli conflicts. From desert dunes to mountain passes, the old Soviet gun kept proving its worth. Its thunder echoed over Sinai and the Golan Heights, and the world started calling it not just a gun, but a symbol of resistance. By the time of the Afghan War in the 1980s, it had become a weapon used by both sides. Soviet convoys mounted it on armored trucks to guard against ambushes. The Mujahideen used captured ones to fight back from the hills. Few weapons have ever served both attacker and defender with the same efficiency. In the mountains, its roar was like thunder, bouncing between cliffs, shaking the valleys. Soldiers said, when the DShK starts, even the rocks take cover. Decades passed, but the gun refused to fade into history. Factories around the world started producing their own copies. In China, it became the Type 54. In Yugoslavia, the M87. In Egypt and North Korea, local variations adapted for regional ammo. Every version carried the same soul, the unmistakable rhythm of a weapon that never quits. It wasn't just a tool anymore. It was a presence, a mechanical heart that kept beating across generations of wars. By the late 20th century, the DShK had fought on almost every continent, from Africa to Asia, from the Middle East to the Balkans, mounted on tanks, boats, jeeps, even on rooftops in civil wars. War photographers began calling it the eternal gun, because wherever there was conflict, you could almost bet the DShK was there, still firing. And with each new conflict, its legend only grew. As wars evolved, so did the DShK. The original design, adopted in 1938, had minor weaknesses. The barrel overheated during prolonged fire, and accuracy dropped over long bursts. Soviet engineers solved these problems in the DShKM. The modernized version reduced weight, improved the recoil system, and stabilized the feed mechanism. The sights were upgraded for better targeting, and maintenance became even easier. This wasn't just incremental improvement. It transformed the weapon into a truly versatile system. It could be installed almost anywhere, on tripods for infantry, on armored vehicles, on anti-aircraft mounts. Whole families of platforms were developed, ZPU-1, ZPU-2, ZPU-4, with 1, 2, or 4 barrels creating a wall of lead. Against low-flying aircraft, a quartet of DShKMs could turn the sky into a steel storm. Even modern pilots would describe it as hitting an invisible barrier of bullets. Beyond formal military use, improvisation played a key role in the weapon's longevity. In Africa and the Middle East, fighters mounted DShKs on pickup trucks, tractors, and even old SUVs. These technical vehicles turned into mobile firepower, cheap, fast, and deadly. A single DShK could halt an advancing convoy, replacing what might otherwise require an entire artillery battery. Comparisons with Western counterparts highlight why the DShK endured. The American Browning M2HB was technically superior, more precise, more stable, and easily modernized. Yet it required sophisticated industry and skilled technicians. In field conditions with mud, dust, and frost, the Browning was fragile compared to the rugged DShK. It could be repaired with minimal tools, and it kept firing despite rough handling. German weapons like the MG-15NA and MG-17 were lighter and effective in aircraft, but against armored targets they were powerless. The Czechoslovak ZB-60 showed promise, yet it was produced in limited numbers and could not compete. Simplicity, durability, and mass production were the DShK's true advantages. By the 1950s, the DShK had become an international standard. It served on front lines from Korea to the Middle East, often in conflicts where superpowers preferred proxy wars. In Vietnam, it challenged helicopters. In Afghanistan, it fought in high mountain passes. No matter the era, its presence changed the balance on the battlefield. Soldiers trusted it. It required minimal training, could be disassembled and reassembled in minutes, and kept delivering firepower reliably. Its rhythm became familiar, the heavy, methodical thump, thump, thump that signaled both danger and order. Even decades after World War II, hearing it was enough to make troops adjust their tactics. Its role as weapon without a nation became clear. It wasn't tied to ideology or army. It was a tool of survival, mobility, and firepower. Wherever conflict flared, you could almost always find a DShK mounted on a truck, rooftop, or improvised platform. Its design had remained remarkably stable, heavy, simple, efficient. Engineers from the 1930s likely never imagined their creation would still be in action in the 21st century. And yet it adapted. Optical sights, night vision, laser pointers, all could be added without changing the core mechanics. It wasn't about new technology, it was about reliability. When electronics failed or precision optics broke down, the DShK kept working. It reminded commanders and soldiers that, at the end of the day, the simplest, most reliable solution often wins. Even in post-Soviet spaces, the DShK remained active. Armies, border guards, and police units relied on it. Installed on boats, armored vehicles, helicopters, it survived, unchanged in essence, yet modernized enough to meet contemporary needs. Its simplicity allowed survival in the harshest environments. It could be mounted anywhere, repaired anywhere, and fired by almost anyone with minimal training. This made it ideal in conflicts where expensive, high-tech weapons were unavailable, yet firepower was critical. Decades of warfare stamped the DShK with a unique legacy. It wasn't just metal. It carried the history of hundreds of conflicts, the marks of countless soldiers and fighters. Dents, scratches, paint marks, each told a story of survival, battle, and adaptation. Through deserts, mountains, cities, and forests, it endured. Historians recognize the DShK as a symbol. Like the Kalashnikov for rifles or the Tiger for tanks, the DShK embodies reliability, resilience, and the enduring power of simple design. Its silhouette, barrel perforation, and down-feeding belt are instantly recognizable, a universal language of war. But beyond the design, it's human experience that defines its legend. It protected troops, covered retreats, held defensive lines, and repelled aircraft. It survived decades, not because it was modern or flashy, but because it worked, consistently, dependably, fearlessly. Even today, in exhibitions of military history, it stands alongside cutting-edge weapons. The plaque often reads, "Inactive Service," a testament to a weapon whose century-long life defies the usual rules of obsolescence. And as long as conflicts occur in rough terrain, under harsh conditions, or in regions without advanced infrastructure, the DShK continues its silent duty. Its rhythm, its reliability, its heavy presence, reminders that sometimes effectiveness outlasts sophistication. By the time the world entered the digital era, drones, precision-guided munitions, and advanced optics became the focus of modern armies. Yet in many conflict zones, the old DShK still roared. Its enduring value was simple: reliability, firepower, and adaptation. Where electronics failed, where complex systems jammed or overheated, the DShK kept firing. In post-Soviet regions, it served in armies, police units, and border patrols. It was mounted on boats, armored personnel carriers, and helicopters. Even decades after its creation, the design remained nearly unchanged, rugged, simple, and effective. The very minimalism of the mechanism was its strength. Every extra part could introduce failure, yet the DShK had few to none. Where states collapsed or infrastructure was lacking, the weapon became a lifeline. It could be disassembled and reassembled in the field, with no workshop, no tools, no specialists required. A mountain patrol, a convoy, or a small defensive unit could install it on a pickup truck and instantly gain a mobile fortress of firepower. This is why, in the chronicles of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the DShK appears repeatedly. In footage from conflict zones, it's often mounted on roofs, trucks, and improvised positions amid dust, chaos, and combat. It does not belong to any single army or nation. It is simply present. Its shape and sound a testament to an era when weapons were built to work, not to impress. Engineers in the 1930s likely never imagined their creation would still operate nearly a century later. Yet the DSK's phenomenon lies in its essence. Everything that could become obsolete has done so, except its reliability. The machine gun, designed for protection and support, continues to fulfill its function regardless of context. Even in today's technologically advanced battlefields, where drones hover above and operators engage targets from kilometers away, somewhere on the ground, a DShK crew still holds the line. When modern systems fail, there remains only reliability, metal, ammunition, and skilled hands. Every weapon eventually becomes a symbol. The Kalashnikov represents rifles. The Tiger tank epitomizes armored warfare. And for heavy machine guns, the DSK holds that place. Its silhouette, mountings, perforated barrel, and feeding belt are instantly recognizable. But beyond the metal lies the human element. The DSK did not simply fire bullets. It protected, it covered retreats, it held lines, and it repelled attacks. In every role, it remained dependable, resilient, and unforgiving in its effectiveness. Today, alongside modern weapons in military exhibitions, the DSK stands as it did decades ago. Black metal, simple construction, a heavy tripod. The sign next to it reads, "In active service." It is a recognition of a legend that is still alive.
Technology advances, precision weapons improve, and digital systems dominate modern arsenals. Yet as long as humans continue to fight in harsh conditions, the value of the DShK remains, a weapon that does not fail, a tool that endures. Its nearly century-long journey through deserts, mountains, cities, and oceans has left marks, dents, scratches, paint, history etched into metal. Its hum in archival footage is more than the sound of bullets. It is the echo of an era where survival depended on endurance, skill, and trust in simple, effective engineering. The DShK is not just a machine gun. It is a memory, a testament to a time when human ingenuity and metal met to create something enduring. A shot fired was not merely destruction, it was proof of resilience. And perhaps that is why, after decades, it still stands guard. Where newer systems fail, where electronics falter, where resources are scarce, the DShK remains a constant. It embodies reliability, simplicity, and the unchanging truth of combat. Effectiveness matters more than sophistication. It has lived through nearly 100 years of conflict and continues to assert its presence wherever firepower is needed. Its story is not over. In the hands of soldiers, peacekeepers, or defenders, the DShK still speaks the universal language of survival and power. Through the hum of its barrel, the rhythm of its fire, and the steel of its design, it tells the same story it is told for generations. Some machines do not age, and some weapons never betray the hands that wield them. The DShK endures, a legend of iron, courage, and unyielding reliability. And as long as conflicts exist, it will continue to remind the world that true power lies in consistency, in trust, and in simplicity that never fails.